This is The Chris Berry Show. Expert information on wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. Information that you can understand. Here's your host, Chris Berry.
And welcome to The Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. And each show we like to start with a positive focus. But before I get into that, I just want to define what the second half of life means, because sometimes people ask me about that. Well, when I'm talking about the second half of life, what I'm talking about is retirement. And now you might be thinking, well, is that really the second half of life? And granted, we don't talk too much math here, but go with me on this one, because I think it does make sense. So when I'm talking about the second half of life, what I'm looking at it is the fact that people are living longer than ever these days. Where if you look at when Social Security was started, the average life expectancy was actually only 63. And now people are living to 80, 90. I just had my oldest client pass away at 107. So we're living longer than ever these days. And what I find is a lot of people retire late 50s, early 60s maybe. And there really is a lot of time in retirement. And so we need to make sure that our money lasts as long as possible, because one of the big concerns out there is longevity risk, outliving our money. And longevity risk, or the longevity threat, is one of the things that really it just exacerbates the other threats. Things like long-term care costs, taxes going up, interest rates, etc. So when we talk about planning for the second half of life, I don't use that term flippantly. I really believe that for a majority of us, especially those still working, we might have a lot of time in retirement. So we need to make sure that our money lasts at least as long as we do. So just wanted to kind of define that second half of life term. Sometimes people ask me about that. And so, like I said, we always start the Chris Berry Show off on a positive focus, something positive that happened in the previous week. And I talked about this a little bit last week, but this last week, what I was able to do was give a presentation to the Oakland County Bar Association, the tax attorneys of the Oakland County Bar Association, which probably to a majority of the listeners out there, that does not sound exciting at all. Talking both legal as well as tax to a bunch of other lawyers who specialize in tax. But I promise you, it's something that excites me, energizes me, just shares some of the planning that we're doing with other attorneys, other tax professionals. And so we're a big fan of education, not only education to the public, to our clients, to the people interested in getting a holistic plan together. But also we do a fair bit, quite a lot actually, of education to other professionals because we do have a specialized niche in this area. In fact, I'm one of, I was kind of doing the math, speaking of math, less than 0.2% of attorneys and advisors who are one of Ed Slott's master elite IRA group. So I'm part of Ed Slott, who's really recognized as the national guru when it comes to retirement planning. And I'm not just saying that. Wall Street Journal has said that. But I'm part of his mastermind group where we talk about distribution planning for retirement accounts. So we do have some specialized knowledge here. I'm also one of a handful of certified outlaw attorneys in the state of Michigan. So we really do have a deep level of knowledge in this area. So not only do we like to provide education, not only to the public and the clients through this radio show we do once a week or podcast, which you can download on iTunes or at the Chris Berry Show. We do workshops once a week for the public at one of our 4 different locations around Metro Detroit, whether it's Bloomfield Hills, Livonia, Novi, or Brighton, and we're establishing our Ann Arbor office as well. So we love education. We love providing knowledge, unbiased knowledge to the public. But also we provide a lot of education to other professionals, where, if you didn't know, I was an adjunct professor of law at Western Michigan Cooley Law School, where I would teach second and third year law students stuff that I share with you on a weekly basis. So think of this as like your mini law school class. As well as that, I also am a presenter for the Institute of Continued Legal Education, which provides continued education to other practicing attorneys, where they've come out, interviewed me, they've toured our office, and we're one of the contributors to the Institute of Continued Legal Education. Also, through the National Business Institute, they tapped me on the shoulder to give a presentation to other attorneys and CPAs on asset protection trusts. So I'm putting together the materials for that, and that's going to be early next year. But this last week, I was able to give a presentation to the Oakland County Bar Association, the tax attorneys. And a fellow CPA and attorney asked me to come in and present to their group. And what I thought I'd do today is just share some of the information I presented to them. And I promise it won't be too boring, even though we're talking about death, tax, and incapacity. But I think it's important to understand. So what I presented to them and what they asked me to present on was the different types of trusts and how those different types of trusts are taxed. And I promise we won't get too deep in the weeds with taxation, but I do want to cover this because it's important, because you need to understand that there's different types of trusts out there. So a lot of people are familiar with a revocable living trust, but understand there's more than just that. So in our first segment of the show today, we're going to cover the different types of trusts and how they're taxed and why you might want a castle trust versus a revocable trust, or maybe you want a veterans asset protection trust. And then our second segment today on the Chris Berry Show, we're going to get into some more information about understanding IRAs and Roths, those retirement accounts, just so that we have a basic understanding of those retirement accounts. Because I'm excited next week to, again, participate in a mastermind training. I'm flying out to San Diego to visit with Ed Slott and his group as we work on advanced strategies. And maybe in the future I'll share some of those advanced strategies. But this week we're going to cover some more of the basics, talk about Roth conversion, current taxation of retirement accounts, when is an IRA right for you, understanding beneficiary designations on those IRAs. So just some of the basics. So I'm excited for that in our second segment of the Chris Berry Show. And then our third segment today, we're going to get into some of the questions and answers, some of the questions that our listeners have submitted over the past couple of weeks, especially since last week we ran over with Aaron Wooster as we're talking about Medicare and open enrollment. And if you haven't listened or you didn't listen to the show last week, you can download the podcast or you can go to thechrisberryshow.com to listen to last week's episode, which was a great one talking about Medicare, especially with Medicare open enrollment upon us right now. And I'm very excited. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a couple of guests. We're going to have Kathy Schaefer on the 28th. She's going to be talking to us about the long-term care journey. And Kathy has years and years of experience dealing with long-term care, the elder care journey of needing home care and assisted living and understanding when to make that transition. And then the following week, or actually also that week, we're going to cover some of the gruesome estate planning mistakes. So it's leading up to Halloween, so I'm excited to share some scary estate planning mistakes that we see in our office. And that's going to be the first segment next week of the Chris Berry Show. Second segment, we're going to have Kathy Schaefer talking about that long-term care journey. And then the following week, October 4th, we're going to have Matt Sova, who's a CPA, talking about some of the big tax changes, the big tax things we should think about as the end of the year is approaching. Because we only have a couple months left before we have to get ready for tax season and file our taxes. So tax preparation, that part's the easy part, but we want to do some tax planning. And so there's some things we should be thinking about at the end of the year with regards to our taxes. And I'm sure we're going to get into some of the topics. We're going to cover big picture today in terms of Roth conversions and looking at moving money from your taxable accounts into maybe tax-deferred accounts, or maybe moving it into asset protection trusts. So that's going to be October 4th with Matt Sova. Or I'm sorry, not October 4th, November 4th. Time is flying by. And then November 11th is Veterans Day. So, of course, we're going to spend some time thanking the veterans for their service, the surviving spouses for their sacrifices, and then we're going to get into a discussion of veterans benefits. We're going to talk about service-connected compensation. So if you have a disability rating, benefits that are available monthly for you. Then we're going to get into talking about the aid and attendance benefit, or the non-service connected pension. And we've spent a lot of time talking about the changes that we've experienced there. But on Veterans Day, November 11th, we're going to get into a further discussion on the VA benefit. And then one thing is a service to the listeners of the Chris Berry Show. If you were to call our office on Veterans Day, which is Sunday, or on Monday, which is Veterans Day observed, because we're not going to be in on Sunday, obviously, then what's going to happen is if you're a veteran or surviving spouse of a veteran, what we'll do is we'll set up a time to create a free financial and medical power of attorney if you are a veteran or surviving spouse of a veteran. If you call in on Veterans Day, which is Sunday, or Veterans Day observed, which is that following Monday. Now, you have to call in on that day because we need to be able to wrap our arms around all the veterans and surviving spouses for these free financial and medical powers of attorney. But if you are a veteran or surviving spouse of a veteran and you're interested in having a financial or medical power of attorney or both prepared for you at no cost, please call us at 810-355-2584. Now, that phone call has to be on Veterans Day or the following day, which is Monday, Veterans Day observed. So that's the upcoming schedule of the Chris Berry Show. Really excited to bring on those guests and cover these important topics. Now, like I said, I wanted to get into that positive focus of mine of being able to present and share information with the Oakland County Bar Association, the tax attorneys of the group. And we had about 12 tax attorneys there. And so we covered taxation as it relates to trusts. And so I wanted to share that with the listeners of the Chris Berry Show. So first, let's kind of talk about what a trust is. So a trust, as it relates to estate planning, is a legal document, and probably the easiest way to think about this would be to think about a trust kind of like a suitcase. So while you're alive and well, you're the one that creates the suitcase. So the technical term there is a grantor. So you're the person that creates the suitcase. Then typically you will serve as the trustee of the trust, meaning you're the one holding on to the suitcase. And then it's important to have the trust funded. We need to make sure that we have assets titled in the name of the trust. And this would be either changing beneficiary designations or changing ownership to list the trust. So we need to make sure that there's stuff in that suitcase, so to speak. And then when you pass away, you might pass that suitcase on to your successor trustee. So this would be someone who would kind of wrap up your affairs, but think of it as they're the one holding on to the suitcase now that you've passed away. So they would pay off your final expenses, wrap up your affairs, and then they would pass this suitcase on to the beneficiary. So they would take the assets out of the suitcase, out of the trust, and distribute it to the beneficiaries. So one of the big advantages of setting up a trust, at the very least, and using the most basic type of trust or revocable living trust, is that what we can do is we can avoid probate, which is always super important because it's a court process, it's time-consuming, and it's costly. And in addition to avoiding probate, we can control that distribution, where we can decide where the assets will go upon death, and we can decide the manner in which they go to those beneficiaries. So if you're one of our listeners out there and you have young children at home, you probably don't want to leave it outright to someone who's like my children. My kid's Ryan, he's age 8 right now, and my daughter, she's 5. I don't want to leave it outright to them because they're going to spend all the money on Legos, which I think would be kind of cool, but probably not the best use of the money. So with a trust, you can appoint someone else as a trustee to manage that money for the benefit of the beneficiaries. So with a revocable living trust, really, it doesn't change your taxes at all because the trust is taxed at your own personal income tax rate. And typically, you don't even get a tax ID number for a revocable living trust because it's, to use a technical term, and this is what I used when I was presenting to the Oakland County Bar Association, the tax attorneys, to use a technical term, we call this a grantor trust. So if you have a revocable living trust, it's a grantor trust, meaning when you set it up, you don't pay taxes any differently than you normally do. So a revocable living trust, it's helpful, it's important, because you can avoid probate and you can control the distribution. Now we have a different type of trust. We also have what's called a castle trust. And a castle trust is an asset protection trust. And it's also a grantor trust, just like that living trust is, just like that revocable living trust is. Now the castle trust, to use a technical term, is an irrevocable trust. Now, irrevocable doesn't mean we can't make changes to it. We can always change beneficiaries or change successor trustees. And irrevocable doesn't mean we have to get a new tax ID number. It doesn't automatically mean, and again, to use a technical term, it doesn't mean it's a non-grantor trust. So this castle trust is a form of irrevocable trust that can avoid probate, control the distribution, but now build in asset protection, where we can protect you from a lawsuit, a creditor action, a bankruptcy. But most importantly, what we can do is we can build in asset protection where if you would ever need any type of long-term care costs, whatever was held in the trust, as long as we've made it 5 years, would be protected from that nursing home or Medicaid spend down. Now, a lot of people, especially as they're getting near retirement, are concerned about long-term care costs, that devastating $8,000 to $12,000 a month nursing home bill. So what this castle trust does is gives us the ability to shelter and protect assets so that if we were to need long-term care, all of our hard-earned assets aren't going to go to the nursing home or the government. We're going to be able to protect those and use those for our own needs. Now, this castle trust is a grantor trust, which means that from a tax perspective, we don't pay income tax any differently than we do now, where it's very similar to a revocable living trust in that we don't have to get a separate tax ID number or anything like that. So it's very straightforward from a taxation standpoint, which makes it appealing because we want to keep things as simple as possible. So that's two types of trusts. And join me in the next segment is we're going to wrap this idea up talking about also a veteran's asset protection trust and how that is taxed. And then we're going to get into some IRA basics. So join me after the break. Thank you.
Certified elder law attorney Chris Berry from the Elder Care Firm in Brighton can help you protect your assets from the cost of long-term care, and they can also help you with estate planning, like they did for Linda Emerson.
I had to redo my will. It weighed on me that I hadn't changed it. I wanted to make everything easy for my daughter whenever I do keel over. But I went in, it was very professional, and sat down with Chris. I would definitely suggest him because he knows his stuff and he's not aggressive. He's, very friendly and makes you feel comfortable because I think he realizes it's not a comfortable thing for people. It was just an easy process. I came out of it and I told my daughter, "It's all yours, kiddo."
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Visit theeldercarefirm.com today or call 810-214-3800, 810-214-3800.
Welcome back to the Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. And in our first segment, we're talking about taxation of trusts, which can seem pretty boring, so I'm trying to spice it up and make it as exciting as possible. But it was something that I presented at the Oakland County Bar Association to the group of tax attorneys. So we had a lot of brain power in that room that day. But it was my job to kind of share the different types of trusts that we use for our clients. And if this is something that's interesting to you and you want to learn more about these trusts and how they might apply to you and how they might benefit you, and how just having a basic revocable trust might not be enough, then please give us a call at 810-355-2584 to ask us about our weekly workshops that we do at our different locations throughout Metro Detroit. And we do a workshop about once a week. This past week, we actually had 2 workshops. We did one in Bloomfield Hills, and then we also did another workshop in Brighton. And these workshops are a great way to get your questions answered, learn how just having a basic revocable trust might not be enough. And so in our previous segment, we were talking about different types of trusts in taxation. And I covered how a revocable living trust can avoid probate, control the distribution upon death. Very important. And from a tax standpoint, it doesn't change your taxes at all. We still use your own Social Security number. You don't have to file a separate tax return or anything like that. Then we got into a second type of trust. And this is a type of trust that really is appealing more and more to clients. And so with this castle trust, what we're able to do is avoid probate, just like a revocable living trust. We're able to control the distribution, so decide how we leave things to our beneficiaries or our children. But then on top of that, and this is what the revocable trust does not do, is it can build in asset protection, where we can protect you from lawsuits. So if you were to get in a car accident, whatever you have inside the trust would be protected. But most importantly, it can protect from that long-term care or nursing home spend down to ensure that all of your hard-earned assets you can utilize versus seeing that money wasted to the government or to nursing home care. Because you worked hard for this money, for your assets. We want to make sure that we can protect them. And that's where the castle trust comes into play. Now, the great thing about the castle trust, in addition to avoiding probate, controlling the distribution upon death, is that it protects you from the nursing home costs, the long-term care costs, the lawsuits. But from a tax perspective, it's exactly the same as a revocable trust. So this castle trust is also a form of grantor trust. Even though it's an irrevocable trust, and again, you can change beneficiaries, you can change trustees, it's still a grantor trust. And what that means is that from a tax perspective, you don't do anything differently. You don't have to fill out a new tax form. It's not taxed at compressed tax rates. It's very simple, very straightforward. And so this was something that kind of threw some of the smart tax attorneys in the room for a loop, because they were so used to irrevocable trusts having to be non-grantor or taxed at a different tax rate. Well, the types of trusts they were used to were the old type of irrevocable trusts that we would have to use for estate tax purposes, where now, unless you have more than $11 million, you don't have to worry about estate taxes. And if you do have that problem, then we would use some more complicated trusts. But if you have less than $11 million, then this castle trust is a great way to avoid probate, control the distribution, build in asset protection, all while keeping taxes and tax preparation as simple as possible, because it's no different than a revocable living trust. So if you have a revocable living trust and you're doing your taxes and you think it's pretty darn easy, well, it's going to be just as easy with a castle trust, but now you're building in asset protection. And that appeals to a lot of our clients because they're concerned about avoiding probate, controlling the distribution, but also, especially in this litigious society that we live in, where all these personal injury attorneys, you can't drive anywhere near Detroit without seeing a bunch of personal injury attorney billboards, whether it's Jumana or Sam Bernstein. But if you want to protect yourselves, then a revocable trust doesn't offer asset protection for you while you're alive. It really only protects your beneficiaries. That's where you have to get into an asset protection trust like a castle trust. So from a taxation perspective, a revocable trust and a castle trust are exactly the same. Now I'm going to introduce a third type of trust. Now this type of trust works a little bit different. And so we call this a Veterans Asset Protection Trust. And we utilize this trust when we're helping a veteran or surviving spouse qualified for the much needed aid and attendance benefit, where we can help a veteran or surviving spouse bring in an extra $1,000 to $2,000 a month tax-free to help pay for home care or assisted living. Now, this Veterans Asset Protection Trust is what's called a non-grantor trust. And what that means is that from a tax perspective, it works very different than your revocable living trust or the castle trust. And with this non-grantor trust, we have to get a separate tax ID number. And so this makes taxation of the trust more complicated. So we only use this trust in specific situations, specifically when we have a veteran or surviving spouse and we're trying to get them qualified for this aid and attendance benefit in their over and assets for the resource test. So it works a little bit differently. Now we have to get a separate tax ID number. Now we have to do K-1s coming out of the trust. So we only use these in very specific situations. And of the 3 trusts that I described, the Veterans Asset Protection Trust is probably the least used of the common trusts that we use in our office. More often, we're using that Castle Trust, which is the Asset Protection Trust, or we're utilizing a revocable living trust. So hopefully that was helpful. Just wanted to describe the different types of trust we use a lot of times in our office, and then talk about some of the taxation issues around those different types of trust. So hopefully I didn't put you to sleep, especially if you're driving, because I know taxes can be kind of boring. And then on top of that, we're not only talking about taxes, but we're also talking about death and incapacity. Not the most exciting things to be talking about on a Sunday. But I think it's important. So I did want to share that information with the listeners of the Chris Berry Show. Now, like I said in our previous segment, I want to kind of switch gears and continue the conversation we've been having on the show, talking about retirement planning and just covering some of the basics. And so if you were listening to our show, I want to say 2 weeks ago, we got into some basic IRA, basic 401k discussions. And we're going to continue that conversation. And so some of the things we're going to talk about today, just getting a little more detail, talking about your retirement accounts. So your 401ks, your IRAs, your Roths, we're going to define some of those terms, talk about what makes sense for you, because a lot of times these retirement accounts are clients' largest assets. So we need to make sure that we take care of them intelligently. So the first question I'm going to pose to you, and I'm going to give you some concepts around that question, would be to ask yourself which IRA is right for you. Because we have different types of IRAs, but I kind of want to keep it in 2 basic terms. We either have what's called a traditional IRA. So with a traditional IRA, that's money that you have not paid income tax on, but when you take that money out of that investment, you have to pay income tax on. So this would be like your 401ks that get rolled over to an IRA. Or would a Roth IRA make more sense for you? So what a Roth IRA is money that's already been taxed, you invest it inside of this Roth, and then when you take the money out, it grows tax-free. So with a traditional IRA, you're taxed not on the seed, but you're taxed on the harvest. With a Roth IRA, you're taxed on the seed, but you can take the harvest out tax-free. So which of these IRAs are right for you? Well, depending on your income, if your income does allow, for a majority of people, especially those that think taxes are going to go up in the future, which a lot of experts do, looking at a Roth IRA option probably makes a lot of sense. Now, there's contribution limits based on your age, so you can either contribute $5,500 or $6,500 a year to a Roth, depending on your age. So there's contribution limits, but then also there's income limits. You're only allowed, based on your income, you may or may not be allowed to contribute to a Roth IRA. Now, there's some ways around that, whether we get into backdoor Roths, but that's a topic for another show, or if your employer offers you a Roth 401k option, that could make sense as well. But for a lot of people, if you think IRAs are going to go up, if you think taxes will be going up in the future, and a lot of people do because we're $21 trillion in debt, we have all these baby boomers retiring, we're at a historically low marginal tax rate now, then investing in a Roth probably makes some sense. Now, what if you're self-employed? Well, if you're self-employed, you should certainly look at setting up a SEP, which is a self-employed plan, contributing to that if you can. And then here's an interesting strategy. If you have young children and they have any income, maybe from summer employment, but they have to have some type of income, one of the things that you could look at doing is contributing to a Roth for them. Because why this seems so interesting or is such a cool idea is because you could put the money in, and then, especially if they're younger, this money could grow for years and years and decades tax-free, where we don't have to worry about what the IRS is doing, whether they're going to raise taxes or not. We can get out of that partnership with the Internal Revenue Service. So if you do have the young children on the payroll, or if they're earning some income from that newspaper route, or when I was younger, I used to lifeguard, contributing to a Roth IRA, especially when you're younger, makes a ton of sense because you can get the compound earnings tax-free and this growth tax-free so that we can create another source of tax-free income in retirement for our young children. So which IRA is right for you? Kind of depends on your situation, but especially if you're one of those people that think taxes have to go up in the future, which a majority of people do, then exploring that Roth option makes sense. Now, what if you're one of those people that have contributed and kind of bought into the mainstream media idea of deferring paying taxes as long as possible? Throw as much as you can into those 401ks and IRAs, even over and above the match. So maybe if you bought into that, what are your options at this point? Well, now you could look at doing what's called a Roth conversion. So there's no limits on how much money you can how much money you can convert from a traditional IRA to a Roth. But when you do this conversion, you do have to pay the tax on it. And when you do this conversion, probably the best way to pay the tax is from your non-qualified accounts. So there's no limits on the conversions, but understand you do have to pay the tax. And so basically what you're doing is you're doing a conversion, converting that traditional IRA, paying the income tax, and then throwing it into a Roth IRA. So now this money can grow tax-free. And so, again, who does this make sense for? This makes sense for people who think taxes are going to be higher in the future than they are now, as well as people who are going to remain at least in the same, if not lower tax bracket in the future. Now, there's a big myth that automatically in retirement you're going to be in a lower tax bracket. That's just not always the case. So there takes some exploring there. But if you do think taxes are going to go up in the future, with the majority of people think that's going to happen for a variety of reasons, then it makes sense to look at doing intelligent Roth conversions. So I'm not saying just take your whole IRA, convert it into a Roth all in 1 year, but to do something we call bracket bumping, where we look at what is your marginal tax rate, how much room do we have in that bracket, and maybe pay the income tax to convert the traditional IRA to a Roth over a period of years. And there's a sweet spot to do this, especially from the time that you retire until age 70 and a half. And this makes sense anytime you're over 59 and a half, because prior to 59 and a half, if you were to take money out of your IRAs, you could pay a penalty, maybe a 10% penalty. And then after 70 and a half, you have to start taking out your required minimum distributions. Otherwise, you pay a 50% penalty. So there's this magic time from 59 and a half to 70 and a half, and more specifically from the time that you retire until 70 and a half, where it makes sense to look at doing Roth conversions. And so one of the things that we can do for our clients is run a tax map where we can look at intelligently how much does it make sense to convert each year. For example, we're doing this with the clients, and we saw that they had about $54,000 worth of income for the year. And running that tax map, we saw that they could convert about $50,000 additional from their traditional IRA to move it into the Roth IRA without going up into a higher tax bracket. And so in that situation, it made sense to look at converting about $50,000 worth of traditional IRA money to move it into a Roth so that that money could continue to grow tax-free. And now it's an individual situation. Everyone's situation is a little bit different. But if you want to learn more about this type of strategy of running tax maps to look at during Roth conversions, then I suggest you attend one of our clarity building workshops that we offer once a week at our different locations, whether it's Bloomfield Hills, Livonia, Novi, Brighton, and then in the future, Ann Arbor. And if you want some more information on that, give us a call anytime at 810-355-2584, or visit our website at thechrisberryshow.com, where you can click through and get a list of our upcoming workshops. Now, in our third segment today, we're going to get into some of the questions and answers from some of our loyal listeners. So if you do have a question you want us to take a shot at reading on air, shoot us an email anytime at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. And we'll select a couple of those emails or questions each week to share with our listeners. Or you can give us a call anytime at 810-355-2584. If we're not available, just leave a voicemail asking your question. So join me after the break as we get into questions and answers from our loyal listeners.
The cost of long-term care can be overwhelming. If you're dealing with long-term care costs, make plans to attend the next free informative workshop from the Elder Care Firm in Brighton. They'll show you how to protect your hard-earned assets and obtain the governmental benefits you deserve, including veterans benefits and Medicaid.
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. As the only certified elder law attorney in Livingston County, I have the knowledge and estate planning strategies to help you. When you call, reserve your seat at our next workshop or schedule a free 15-minute phone consultation. The Elder Care Firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Spots are filling up for the next free Elder Care Firm workshop. Reserve your seat today by calling 810-214-3800 or visit theeldercarefirm.com. The Elder Care Firm also invites you to join them at this year's Walk to End Alzheimer's. The walk is on Saturday, October 1st in downtown Brighton. Call 810-214-3800 today.
Welcome back to the Chris Berry Show, where we talk wealth, estate, and tax planning for the second half of life. And so in this segment, what we're going to do is we're going to get into some of the questions and answers from our loyal listeners. And if you do have any questions, you can give us a call at 810-355-2584 or shoot us an email at askchris@thechrisberryshow.com. And so we're going to start off with a question from Harvey. So Harvey asked, what is enhanced Harvey asks, what is enhanced estate recovery? Explain the options for long-term care cost offset and protection. What are the financial costs? So Harvey is asking about estate recovery. So what estate recovery is a process where if the state of Michigan has paid out any benefits because, say, you were in a nursing home on Medicaid, they can recover against your estate. Now, right now, the state of Michigan is limited on what they can recover against. So right now, the state of Michigan can only recover against assets that end up going into probate. So if you have a loved one that's been in a nursing home for 6 months and the state of Michigan paid out $50,000 worth of benefits, the state of Michigan can place a lien on any assets that end up going through probate. So what typically ends up going through probate? Well, a lot of times it's the family home. Because a lot of times the home will be just in mom's name and then she passes away. It ends up going into probate. So the common situation is mom is in a nursing home for 6 months. The state of Michigan pays out $50,000 worth of benefits. Mom passes away. The home is exempt while you're alive. And then when mom passes away, the state of Michigan places a lien on the home for $50,000 that has to be paid off. And now, hopefully, the home is valued at more than $50,000. And if so, then the children would have to pay off that lien before they do anything with the home. So that's estate recovery. So how can we protect against that type of estate recovery? Well, understanding that the home is the primary asset that ends up getting into probate, then we need to understand how to avoid probate for the home. So typically what we do right now is we utilize what's called a ladybird deed. A ladybird deed. And basically what a ladybird deed is a type of deed that says it's in mom's name while she's alive. She can do whatever she wants with it. But then when she passes away, the home avoids probate and goes to whoever the named beneficiary is or goes to the trust, if that's who the deed or what the deed lists. So basically it's a beneficiary designation for the home. So very easily, we can set up a ladybird deed to avoid a probate and avoid estate recovery. Now, the ladybird deed works today, and it works because we have estate recovery. And Michigan was actually the last state to implement estate recovery. So good job, Michigan, on holding off on that. Now, most states don't have estate recovery. Instead, what they have is enhanced estate recovery. And so what enhanced estate recovery says is that they're not going to place a lien on the home when you pass away and it enters probate. Instead, they're going to place a lien on the home when you enter the nursing home and you try to apply for any type of governmental programs like Medicaid. So all these people doing ladybird deeds right now, they work if you have a loved one going in a nursing home soon or living in a nursing home now. But if we're planning ahead, we don't want to rely on the ladybird deed because that's going to blow up and it's most likely not going to be grandfathered in. So if we're planning ahead and we want to protect that family home or that cottage up north for the next generation to make sure that the state of Michigan doesn't place a lien on that home, then we're not going to want to utilize a ladybird deed, but instead, when we're planning ahead, we want to utilize an asset protection trust like a castle trust. So with a castle trust, what we can do is we can move that home into the trust, and then if we can make it 5 years from the time that we need nursing home care or want to apply for Medicaid, then everything inside of that trust, like that home, would be protected from that nursing home or Medicaid spend down. And most importantly, when we pass away, that home is going to avoid probate, avoid estate recovery, and go to the people that we want it to versus going to the state of Michigan. So if you do want to avoid estate recovery and you have a loved one who's nearing nursing home care right now, then we're going to utilize a ladybird deed to avoid that estate recovery. If we're in a situation where planning ahead, then we're not going to want to utilize a ladybird deed. Instead, what we're going to want to utilize is a castle trust. So think of it like protecting my castle. So you want to move that real estate into the trust. Once you make it 5 years, everything inside of the trust would be protected from that nursing home or Medicaid spend down, as well as the estate recovery that can come after we've passed away. So hopefully that was helpful, Harvey. Now our next question is from Ken. And Ken asks, can the person who changed a trust along with the attorney who drafted it be in hot water if a person has dementia? So interesting question here, Ken. Again, can the person who changed the trust along with the attorney who drafted it be in hot water? So the issue here is, can someone who has maybe dementia or has maybe not 100% capacity, can they still update their documents? And the answer is yes. Someone who is diagnosed with Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, they can still make changes to their estate plan. So it's not an all or nothing type situation. So even if you have a dementia diagnosis, it doesn't automatically flip a switch where now you have no legal capacity, where you can't be independent anymore. The only way that you can really take away someone's independence or ability to take control of their situation, their ability to sign new documents, would be to have a court take away someone's ability through a guardianship or conservatorship proceeding. Because a dementia diagnosis or some opinion from a physician, all it is an opinion. So if someone does have a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's, then they still might be able to sign and execute documents. So they still might be able to update a trust or update a power of attorney. The key ingredient, the key thing that we look for is what's called lucid moments. So we need moments where the person still understands the nature of what they're doing. They understand the bounty or the assets they have. They understand who the person is that they're appointing to serve different roles. So as long as someone's having lucid moments, they could be comatose or in a coma every other day of the year, but as long as they're having a lucid moment, that might be enough to sign those new documents. So to answer your question, Ken, no, if someone does change a trust, that doesn't automatically put the person who helped them change it or the person who changed it or even the attorney that helped them draft it, that doesn't put them in hot water because they still might have capacity. Because put yourself in that person's shoes. Just because you're older and you're diagnosed with dementia, does that mean automatically that you have zero say in your future? So independence is something that's very, very important. And the ability to make choices, that's one of the things that are most important for anyone here in the United States. We value our independence. So if just because you got a diagnosis of dementia or some doctor says that you're not as sharp as you used to, that doesn't automatically take away someone's independence. the scales of justice weigh independence very heavily. So trying to take away someone's independence, that's a tough slope. And just because one doctor or two doctor or 10 doctors says someone has dementia, that doesn't take away someone's independence. To really do that, you have to go to court. Now, if someone already has a guardianship or conservatorship, then that's probably would stop someone from being able to get a new set of documents unless they went to court and a judge says that's okay. But I don't recommend getting that guardianship or conservatorship. That's really the last step or the last option because, again, you're taking away someone's independence by doing that. So, yes, someone with dementia can make changes to their documents. Now, that could be challenged, though, so someone could challenge that after the fact. And then we get into weighing the opinions of those physicians. So if someone were to challenge the fact that this individual changed their documents because they had dementia, then it might get into court. And then you have to weigh the evidence on both sides. But if something does go to court, let me tell you, the only winners are going to be the attorneys. And so we try to keep things out of court as much as possible. So again, Ken, just because someone has dementia, that doesn't automatically put the attorney helping them draft the documents in the hot water, nor does it appoint or put the person who helped get those documents drafted in hot water. That person with dementia, unless there's a guardianship or conservatorship, they still have independence. And as long as they're having lucid moments, they can potentially update those documents. So hopefully that was helpful. Next, we're going to get into a question from Sam. And Sam asks, is it a good idea to have a brokerage manage my investments? And if so, how do I find a firm to do that for me? I recently came into an unexpected inheritance. It's not a fortune, but it's substantial. I'm a busy working adult with a full-time job and a part-time job. I do have investments, but not the experience, time, or knowledge to feel like I'm very good at it. I'm thinking about investing the inheritance into a brokerage managed account, as I've read online that management fees are small enough to be basically insignificant. Given my busy schedule, this seems ideal. Is it a good idea to have a brokerage manage my investments? And if so, how do I find a firm to do it for me? Well, Sam, that was a great question. I think that should be a segment on one of the upcoming Chris Berry shows where we talk about how to find good advice, how to find an advisor, or how to find someone to manage your investments. And you're right, you have to be careful with the fees and understand who you're paying those fees to. And there's different levels of fees because there's typically a fee to manage the money. So whether it's a brokerage account, financial planner, but then even inside of those investments, there might be additional fees, especially if you're utilizing mutual funds. So, for example, a lot of times people have money at Fidelity, and I'm not going to necessarily bash Fidelity, but we'll use them as an example because a lot of people have money at Fidelity. Now, you might be paying Fidelity overall a fee to manage your money. So I've talked to many people who have, well, I'm going to talk to my advisor at Fidelity. Well, guess what? You're paying a fee for that. And then on top of that, that person at Fidelity is going to make certain recommendations based on your situation. And those recommendations have to be suitable for you. Now, this is key to understand, is that just because someone makes a recommendation that's suitable, that does not mean it's in your best interest. That's the difference between suitability and fiduciary. And these are big key words out there right now. Because almost any financial professional, financial quote-unquote advisor, they have to make recommendations that are suitable for you. So suitable would be like you walk into a butcher shop and the butcher has to sell you meat that's suitable, that's not rancid. Versus my role as a fiduciary, my role with that attorney-client privilege is I have to act in your best interest. So my role would be more of like a dietitian saying, maybe you shouldn't walk into that butcher shop, maybe you should go have a salad. That's very different than the recommendations you'll get from someone who only has a suitability standard. And that's what most professionals are. They work for a brokerage. Even the term brokerage, what is it? It's a sales broker. They're selling investments, and they have to sell you investments that are suitable for you. Is it in your best interest? Maybe not. I've also heard another explanation of, okay, you walk into a suit store and they sell you a suit that fits you. But just because the suit fits, that doesn't mean it looks good on you, right? So similar with this concept of brokerage, understand, just look at the word brokerage. They're sales brokers. They're selling you investments. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to be in your best interest. It just has to be something that's suitable for you. So getting back to the Fidelity example, so you're going to pay someone at Fidelity to basically sell you probably Fidelity investments. So kind of raise your hand unless you're driving if you have one of those Fidelity target funds. Well, guess what? There's a lot of hidden fees inside of those funds. And that's one of the things that when we sit down with our clients, we try to show them the expense ratios and all the hidden fees inside of their funds, not just the fee that you're paying someone to manage those funds. And typically, the person you're paying to manage those funds aren't managing them in your best interest. They're actually managing them so they're suitable for you. So on top of paying someone to sell you stuff, you're also paying for additional fees for the stuff that they're selling you. So one of the things that I would always stress is make sure that the person that you're working with or whoever's managing your investments has a fiduciary responsibility to act in your best behalf. And guess what? That's going to cut out probably 95% of those financial professionals out there, because more often than not, they're working for a brokerage house or a wire house, and they only have a suitability standard. They don't have a fiduciary relationship to act in your best interest. Now, you might be able to find some low-fee sales commission people out there where you're not paying a fee directly. But again, it's going to be a suitability standard versus a fiduciary standard where they're not necessarily acting in your best interest. And again, if you want to learn more about this and learn about that fiduciary standard and something we call the trusted counsel advantage, then I suggest you attend one of our weekly educational workshops where we go over this in a little bit of detail. But you can always register at 810-355-2584, or you can go online to thechrisberryshow.com to learn more. So, Sam, I'd find someone who's going to act in your best interest, not just a brokerage firm where you're going to pay someone to sell you stuff that may or may not be in your best interest. Now, the next question, my company offers a 401k and a Roth 401k, and I currently contribute to both. Should I put all of my contribution money towards the Roth? Well, again, it's going to depend on your situation. We talked about this a little bit last segment, that I'm a big fan of the Roth 401k options, especially if you're working, just because it gives you more time to build up that tax-free money, another leg in retirement of tax-free income. But I would suggest for a majority of people out there, contribute to the Roth 401k option. Make sure to take the match because that's free money. Now, the free money they're going to put into your traditional 401k, but still take that because that's free money. Never say no to free money. That's just good advice right there. But explore looking at that Roth 401k option. And when I bring this up, there's a lot of people that didn't even realize their employer offers a Roth option. So a lot of employers aren't doing a great job of kind of marketing or sharing that they have a Roth 401k option. So I'd contact your plan administrator to see if there is a Roth 401k option and then take advantage of that. Because again, that's money that's going to grow tax-free. When you get to retirement, it's going to be another source of tax-free income. So that's it this week for the Chris Berry Show. I want to thank everyone for listening to us. Join us next week as we have Kathy Schaefer talking about long-term care, and we're going to get into some scary estate planning mistakes. Make it a great week.
Learn more about Chris Berry and how he can help your family by visiting online at thechrisberryshow.com. That's thechrisberryshow.com. You can also call Chris Berry at 810-355-2584. That's 810-355-2584. This program content reflects the opinions of Chris Berry and his guests, not the elder care firm, Prosperity Capital Advisors, or the C.J. Berry Group, and is subject to change at any time without notice. Content provided herein is for informational purposes only and should not be used or construed as investment or legal advice, or a recommendation regarding the purchase or sale of any security, or to follow any legal or tax strategy. There's no guarantee that the strategist's statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. All investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There's no guarantee that any investment plan or strategy will be successful. We recommend that you consult with a professional dedicated to your needs. This program is furnished by the Elder Care Firm.
If you or a loved one is facing long-term care costs, make sure you talk with certified elder law attorney Chris Berry from the Elder Care Firm, like Jennifer did from Howell.
This past summer, my mom had to transition into a nursing home. So we contacted Chris to help get things in order. I wanted the best. I wanted somebody who knew what they were doing. Chris was able to help save a lot of that money that my mom and dad both worked so hard for. I thought that everything would have to go to the nursing home, but it didn't. He was able to save us half of everything that would have gone if we hadn't contacted the elder care firm. And we're all happy about that. Don't go to the nursing home without contacting Chris first.
Hello, I'm attorney Chris Berry. The elder care firm is here to help you and your family find solutions. Call us today.
Protect your assets from probate, long-term care costs, the IRS, and get the governmental benefits you deserve. Visit theeldercarefirm.com today or call 810-214-3800. 810-214-3800.